Arc 7 Chapter 4 has just been released. I highly recommend you check out my other video covering Arc 7 Chapter 3. Anyways, let's get on with the summary for this episode, and it contains spoilers. Chapter 4 starts with another flashback. Subaru has just been practicing training with his whip with Clint. He's also the one who taught Subaru how to parkour. Either way, Subaru gets flipped over and Subaru laments that he needs to practice. Clint gets chastised by Frederica for the way he's treating Subaru. This results in Clint and Frederica essentially getting into an argument where Subaru realizes that they don't really get along well. Subaru thanks Frederica for her concern, but she says that she's more concerned about Clint's lack of care and his inconsiderate attitude. Frederica corrects herself, saying that she does care for Subaru alongside people like Petra, and it turns out that Petra couldn't come to check on Subaru, hence why Frederica showed up. Regardless of Subaru's treatment, Subaru is thankful for Clint's instructions, because there's only so much that Subaru can do on his own, so he learns from Clint and calls him Master. Clint is of course proficient with the whip, hence why he's training Subaru, but it's stated that others also know how to use a whip, so Subaru could learn from other people. Subaru was actually surprised about this, wondering if it was an actual whip or a verbal whip, referring to the statements someone like Ram says, since the words that she actually uses hurt like you're being whipped. Subaru and Clint resume their training, however Subaru cannot succeed in his goal, and Frederica voices her concern but Subaru brushes it off. Clint states that Subaru needs strength to stand alongside Emilia as her knight, and Subaru thanks Clint for being a strict teacher. Clint talks about being proficient in the whip as it opens up more options to Subaru, and Subaru realizes this. Subaru also thinks about his group, that he has a lot of options to him. He has people like Garfiel, Otto, Emilia, and all of them that have roles to fulfill. Clint reminds Subaru to not be overconfident, as there will be times where Subaru won't be able to rely on the help of others, which is what he's been doing time and time again currently. This is something that Subaru thinks about. Subaru asks Clint what he should do if there was a situation where he was alone, and Clint tells Subaru to run away. To be prepared for a situation that may not happen is what Clint was conveying to Subaru. Run away, Clint repeated. Run away without thinking, it's disgraceful. Frederica intervenes, stating that Clint is cruel for treating Subaru like this. Nevertheless, Subaru resumes his training with Clint, and the scene changes. The scene switches back to Subaru holding Rem's body. Rem is confused, but Subaru says it isn't really the time to talk about it as a tree nearby collapses from the damage from the arrow. The tree fell where Rem and Subaru were laying down, but they avoided the tree and used the dust for cover. They rolled away only for Rem and Subaru to fall into a pitfall that Rem previously dug. Subaru broke several of his fingers during the fall, and Rem separated herself from Subaru. There was one benefit of this: the line of sight from the hunter was now cut off, meaning from the pitfall he wouldn't be able to get a clear shot on them. Subaru explains that there's a hunter in the forest, and this hunter has somehow worked out that Subaru and Rem have no form of long range attack. Luckily, the fingers that Subaru broke were on his left hand, and since Subaru was right-handed, it means he can still use his whip. Subaru discussed the hunter, the idea that the last time he met the hunter, he was pinned to the tree with an arrow, yet this person shooting at them was destroying trees with an arrow. Furthermore, Subaru went into the forest in the opposite direction from where he was first killed, so he wondered whether or not there was two hunters, which was unlikely, but Subaru was confused. Subaru wanted to know if this hunter was targeting them or if it was accidental. Subaru tried to think about what was happening. Subaru thought about how he appeared in the meadow with Rem. He surmises that maybe he somehow flew into the meadow from the watchtower and landed without being harmed, or somehow appeared in the meadow with some form of indicator which alerted the hunter to their position. It's speculation, but maybe the hunters were following Subaru, and because he was suspicious, they were attacking. Subaru thinks of another reason. Maybe they were on private property, and the hunter was simply trying to scare them away, and that's the reason why he didn't kill them. Subaru states that he and Rem aren't hostile. He says this aloud so the hunter can hear him, and Rem states not to lump her in with him, and Subaru says again that this really isn't the time to be arguing about this. Subaru realizes that the hunter hasn't responded to his declaration, so it's likely that the hunter wants to fight. However, thinking back to what Clint said, running away would be the best option since there aren't many choices open to Subaru, and if they escaped the pitfall from the opposite side whilst being prone, they wouldn't be seen by the hunter and would be able to escape. Rem catches on to Subaru's desire to escape, and Subaru calls for a truce. He states that he will climb out and get the hunter's attention, and Rem will escape whilst the hunter is distracted. Luckily, the green of the forest should provide cover for Subaru whilst Rem escapes. No matter how good the hunter was, this was a forest, with many trees and objects in their line of sight, which is something Subaru can use to his advantage. Subaru tells Rem to escape and leave a signpost for him so he can catch up to her later, and Rem simply tells Subaru to not tell her what to do. Despite Subaru wanting Rem to escape, Rem rejected his idea, stating that Lewis is nearby. Subaru is confused, wondering why Lewis isn't making any noise after all of this commotion, and we find out that she's been knocked out by Rem. Subaru thinks about abandoning Lewis and again realizes it wouldn't be possible due to Rem, and he again hates that he was holding on to Lewis back in the green room. That was the mess which started all of this in the first place. Subaru locates Lewis's position with the help of Rem, and he thinks back to Clint's words about escaping. But if you cannot escape, then you must press forward with all that you have. Subaru asks for Rem's help, and the scene changes. A small tree is pushed up from the pitfall, and it's immediately sniped by the hunter. Subaru used this chance to make a dash for it. After all, if a hunter uses an arrow to fire, then he needs to reload by getting another arrow from the quiver and then drawing the string back to shoot. This was a time lag that Subaru used to survive. Despite that though, Rem shouted that it was too early, and the hunter, who was experienced, shot a second arrow which landed behind Subaru. Subaru kept running and the hunter was shooting every 2 seconds, with each shot barely missing Subaru. Subaru was about to get hit when Rem threw a boulder which interrupted the hunter, buying Subaru time. We see that Subaru explained that Rem was an Oni, and Rem had no idea how to use magic or tap into a horn, but she still had enough strength, and that's the reason why she was throwing around large rocks. Subaru located Lewis, and again we see that Subaru has issues with her. It's almost as if his soul is rejecting her, not his actual brain. Lewis was unforgivable, and whilst Subaru was thinking to himself, he heard Rem shout from afar. With Lewis in tow, a black shadow blocked his path back to Rem. It was a green snake with yellow eyes, and it had a horn. It was a snake beast. Of course that was Subaru's error. This was an empty forest, a perfect breeding ground for beasts to live in. And he also emitted the witch's scent, which caused it to be attracted to Subaru. Subaru thought to himself he had to escape, but he had no way to get away from the snake. He was about to be eaten. His mind thought back to the rabbits, but his mind rejected that memory. He desperately searched for a way to survive, but he could come up with nothing. Subaru's death was imminent. Subaru shrugged his shoulders. Suddenly, Subaru was covered in black blood. Subaru was shocked. He was drenched in black blood, and the source of it all? It was the beast. The beast was pierced by an arrow. That's the end of the chapter, but it seems that Subaru was saved by the hunter. I'm assuming the hunter just aggroed onto it because it was also an enemy, but I'm still assuming that the hunter is still targeting Rem and Subaru does have Lewis in tow. But let's see what happens. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you to my channel members Zayalid, OMW, Blue Portal, and the original gangster Nutrags.